Welcome back to 25 for 25. On this episode, we're going to look at 4 sewing instruction manuals published just after World War II. If you sew, you know Threads magazine. Well, the digital ambassador for Threads magazine, Peter Lappin, has written that one of the virtues of sewing our own clothes is how it connects us to the past. I was thinking that one of the guiding principles of the work we do here at Archives and Special Collections is to look to the past for creative inspiration. Today's sewer might think these books are out of date and have no value. But on closer inspection, the authors encourage us to look beyond sewing as what one called a first aid to thrift, and to look at sewing instead as creative satisfaction. I think these books can be relevant to the modern maker. They remind us that sewing can be one of the most enjoyable of all the arts. So let's see what we can discover together. Sew It Yourself by Madeline Grigsby was published in 1946 by Garland School of Homemaking. Garland Junior College in Boston, Massachusetts was a women's liberal arts college. From 1903 to 1948, it was named the Garland School of Homemaking for its emphasis in the curriculum on home economics. The Garland Homemaking book series, published that year, focused on topics like sewing, cooking, nutrition, decorating, and home nursing. Better Dressmaking by Ruth Wyeth Spears was published in 1947. Spears was the author and illustrator of the syndicated column How to Sew and pioneered the use of instruction drawings in sewing textbooks and patterns. The New Encyclopedia of Modern Sewing, edited by Frances Blondin, was published in 1948. Blondin was the educational director of the National Needlecraft Bureau, which issued mail-order needlecraft patterns in newspapers for the home sewer. And Modern Dressmaking Made Easy by Mary Brooks Picken was published in 1949. Picken was the author of nearly 100 books on the needle arts. She taught a course on the economics of fashion at Columbia University and was one of the 5 founding directors of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute. She said of her handmade garments that they were, quote, the truest outward expression of herself. Since the 1920s, authors of sewing books have asked themselves and their readers why anyone sews their own clothing when ready-made clothing is cheap, easily available, and constantly refreshed. Ready-to-wear has been available since the introduction of the shirtwaist at the turn of the 20th century. Sewing has been taught in schools since the late 19th century. The National Women's History Museum has noted that by 1939, more than 90% of schools in cities and towns with populations of 2,500 or more had home economics programs. By 1950, clothing courses were a well-established subject area in which students of home economics could learn skills in preparation for homemaking. The Yukon Bulletin of 1950 justified the home economics program of study as satisfying, quote, one of the major interests of women. Remarkably, over 25 years later, in 1979, as a 7th grader in the Maryland public school system, I could still elect home economics as a course of study, and it's how I learned to sew. In Better Dressmaking, the author answers the question, why sew, by emphasizing clothing conservation and remodeling to extend the life of clothing. During World War II, rationing made materials and sewing machines scarce and shifted the emphasis of sewing to what today we call upcycling or remaking garments. Of the home sewer, Spears wrote, quote, she wanted to make clothes that were better than the cheapest ready-mades, but she was happy with the style and the quality of ready-made garments in the medium and higher price ranges. She wanted to know about all the shortcuts and time-saving tricks that manufacturers use in making them. Frances Blondin in the New Encyclopedia of Modern Sewing suggests that whether or not we are aware of it, Most of us sew as much for the pleasure of making something as for sober reasons of economy. Blondin's first lesson for the home sewer is an attractive and wearable pinafore designed to teach the fundamental steps in sewing. The pinafore, a bib-style apron with ruffled trim, worn in a previous generation by little girls, was on trend for adult women in the 1940s. The August 11, 1947 issue of Life magazine describes the apron as having left the kitchen to become an item of high fashion. In this photograph, taken in 1943, my maternal grandmother proudly wears her pinafore. Now connected to the past and armed with Frances Blondin's 18 pages of detailed instructions in 40s-era sewing fundamentals, I set out to achieve what Mary Pickens believed was the desire of all women to in some way use my creative talents. It's our hope at Archives and Special Collections that your exploration of the past will help you to answer the question, why sew, and so many more.